Ketchum Pokemon.
Hey guys, PokéDan here. Recently, my good friend Entity Maze created a video talking about his different versions of Ash Ketchum's teams. Watching this video of his, I agreed with a lot of Ben's choices and I felt myself wanting to give my own versions of Ash's teams as well. So with Ben's blessing, here we are. Today, I'll be talking about my different versions of Ash Ketchum's anime teams. By the way guys, for this video, I will only be talking about Ash's teams from Kanto-Kalos, as I've not seen a lot of the Alola anime yet, so I wouldn't really know what to say about Ash's team for that region. Also guys, all of this is in my own opinion, so feel free to leave your thoughts down below. But with all that being said, let's get started with the video. So let's start off with Ash's original Kanto team, which consists of Pikachu, Bulbasaur, Charizard, Squirtle, Kingler, Muk, Tauros times 30, Snorlax, Butterfree, Pidgeot, Primeape, and Lapras. And oh my god, that is a mouthful. Most of these Pokemon that Ash had, I agree with, but when it came to making my own version of his team, not all the Pokemon made the final cut. For my Kanto team for Ash, I've chosen for him to have Pikachu, Ivysaur, Charizard, Squirtle, Primeape, and Marowak, with Ash still having had caught or travelled with Butterfree, Muk, Snorlax, and Lapras. If you notice, for my version of his Kanto team, Ash never caught Kingler, Pidgeot, or any of his 30 Tauros. And I got rid of these Pokemon as I felt that they weren't crucial members of his team, or were just unneeded, and before any of you say Muk wasn't too important either, hey, I loved Muk's funny appearances, and there was no way on earth that it was going anywhere other than smothering Professor Oak or Tracy in Oak's lab. So looking at this list, Ash keeps Pikachu, Charizard, Squirtle, Primeape, Muk, and Snorlax. And the events that took place with Butterfree and Lapras being released still happened as they shaped the character of Ash Ketchum. However, in my team, Ash doesn't put Primeape in training, but instead keeps it on his team. I've always felt like Primeape would have been such an iconic Ash Pokemon had it stayed with him. It would have got even stronger, and it would have helped Ash out in future battles. For my version of Ash's team, I also chose for Bulbasaur to evolve. Much like Ben said in his video, I like the idea of Ash having a Kanto starter of each stage. And realistically, I could see Bulbasaur evolving rather than Squirtle. As well as this, by having these 3 stages, Ash's Kanto trio would have been just like the Pokemon owned by the Pokemon trainer in Smash Bros 2, which I think would have been a nice little link to see. Finally, for Ash's team, I gave him the new addition of Marowak. In a somewhat dark episode, I could see Ash having caught this Pokemon as a Cubone, whose mother had recently passed away. Ash, being his caring self, would have bonded with Cubone and taken it on his travels as his new friend. Later in the anime, Cubone would have evolved, proving that it is indeed a powerful Pokemon, furthering the Pokemon story. For Ash's story with Cubone, as I said, it would have further shown Ash's caring side. So yeah, that's my version of Ash's Kanto team. Honourable mentions go to the potential members of Rhyhorn and Mr. Mime. But with that said, on to Johto. Okay, so this was Ash's original Johto team, but after reviewing the team, I decided to get rid of Totodile and Donphan. I got rid of Ash's water starter because in my opinion he never needed to own all 3 starters. And honestly, I could see this Pokemon working just as well on Misty's team. For Donphan, aka Phanpy in the Johto anime, I decided to replace it with the Larvitar that Ash hatched. I've always thought that Ash should have kept Larvitar, and instead of having to return it to its mother, he should have been given the egg as a reward for something, maybe winning a tournament. Of course, with Ash hatching Larvitar, I feel it would have been a bit too much for him to hatch another Pokemon in this region. So sadly, goodbye Phanpy. Like how Phanpy later returned in Hoenn, I believe that Larvitar also would have returned. And of course then, it would have evolved into a Pupitar. 2 new additions to Ash's Johto team are Meganium and Quilava. I chose for these Pokemon to evolve because I always felt that Bayleaf had more to offer and could have evolved. So yeah, that was a worthy change in my books. Also, Also, Quilava evolved a bit earlier and not in the Sinnoh region because, again, I always felt like Cyndaquil had more potential, so the evolution made sense. The final addition to Ash's Johto team is Gligar, who gets the same personality and story but this time gets captured in Johto. Ash later brings this Pokemon to Sinnoh after seeing Paul's Gliscor. Believing that Gligar has even more potential since the Johto days, Ash trains and evolves it. And we get the Pokemon that we all know and love. But this time, it doesn't go into training. Screw that. Ash, stop getting rid of your Pokemon. Anyway, shoutouts to other potential members for Ash's team, which are Sneasel and Ursaring. So for Ash's Hoenn team, I got rid of Swellow, Aipom and Glalie. Well, Glalie kind of. For my version of Ash's 3rd gen team, he does still capture Snorunt. But instead of taking Aipom with him to Sinnoh, he takes Snorunt instead, who later evolves into Frostlass. Frostlass is a Pokemon that I've always liked, and seeing as Ash's Glalie was always a bit overlooked, maybe by having the Pokemon stick around for another gen and evolving into a new evolution, it would have been more memorable. Another new addition to Ash's team for Johto is his Zangoose. I know this seems like a bit of a random choice, but hear me out. Seeing as Team Rocket have a Seviper and these Pokemon are natural rivals, it would have been a cool twist to see Ash's Zangoose and Jessie's Seviper constantly at each other's throats. It would make for much more intense battles, and I think that Ash's Zangoose would have a personality like his Weasel. As well as this, Zangoose just kind of looks like an Ash Pokemon to me, so not a dull capture. Apart from these changes to Ash's Hoenn team, he still keeps his Sceptile, Corphish and Torkoal. So yeah, it's a pretty decent team. Honourable mentions this time round go to Flygon and Absol. Up next, we have Ash's Sinnoh team, and this time round, the Pokemon I removed from Ash's party were his Staraptor and Torterra. I got rid of Ash's Staraptor simply because on his team it wasn't really a crucial member, but again, just a Pokemon that could fly. For Torterra, I liked this Pokemon as a Turtwig, but as it evolved, it got more boring. So I decided to replace it with Abomasnow. In my version of his Sinnoh team, Ash caught this Pokemon as a Snover. He decided to catch this Pokemon due to its true fighting spirit, making it a mon that Ash would definitely want to catch, and later on in the anime, it would evolve into an Abomasnow. Next up, we have Gabite. Like in the regular anime, this Pokemon is caught as a Gibble, except this time round, to make the Pokemon more memorable, it evolves. In my version of Ash's team, Gabite evolves when it perfects the move Draco Meteor, and it really shows how powerful it is by doing so. Finally, we have the returning members for Ash's Sinnoh team, who are his Gliscor and Frostlass, who I've spoken about already, but pretty much Gligar returns for the purpose of getting stronger and later evolves, whereas Frostlass arrived with Ash in Sinnoh as a Snorunt. Honourable mentions this time go to Hippowdon, a Pokemon that I could also see Ash obtaining. Okay, so next up is a big one. It's Ash Ketchum's Unova team. Straight off the bat, I decided to get rid of the following Pokemon from Ash's Gen 5 team. His Unpheasant, Pignite, Snivy, Palpitoad, and Boldore. Not that all these Pokemon were bad, but Ash did have a lot of repeated typings on his team. So to clear things up, I got rid of some of the less important Pokemon. I understand that both Ash's Snivy and Pignite were in fact important Pokemon, but I thought it would have been cooler to make the Snivy line exclusive to Ash's rival in the region, Trip. And likewise with Pignite, but for Bianca. Speaking of Unova starters, I also decided to evolve Oshawott. At the beginning and middle of the Unova series, Oshawott's quirky personality doesn't change. But after losing in a gym battle to Clay, losing Ash the entire fight, Oshawott decides to take battling more seriously and evolves when training with Ash. Dewott still keeps the same quirky personality, except with evolution the Pokemon has become a lot more powerful. For Ash's Darmanitan, I don't know, this just kind of feels like a mon that he would have. And due to Pignite being removed, Ash needed a fire type. He catches this Pokemon as a Darumaka in Castelia City, after this crafty mon is caught stealing the gang's food. He later challenges the Pokemon to a battle, captures it, and yeah, it evolves later on in the anime. Apart from these changes, this is my final version of Ash's Unova team. Honourable mentions this time round goes to Gigalith and Chandelure. Finally, we have Ash's Kalos team, which again went through some change. This time round, I decided to get rid of Ash's Talonflame and Noivern from the team. I got rid of these Pokemon because I believe that Ash's Kalos team just had too many flying types. And since I prefer Hawlucha out of these three, I decided to keep it on the team. For a fire type replacement, I decided to give Ash a Pyro. This Pokemon was caught as a Shy Litleo. Being too afraid to battle, this Pokemon later develops and becomes a confident battler. Not starting out as the best fighter, Ash's Pyro later becomes one of his strongest Kalos Pokemon. The final change I made to Ash's team was I made him capture that shiny Phantom from that one random episode. I remember when I was younger watching previews for this episode and I was really rooting for Ash to capture the shiny. So for my version of his team, he does. Phantom isn't necessarily the strongest fighter, but it's still more than capable of taking care of itself in a battle, and yeah, it just adds more variety to Ash's team. So that's the team I gave Ash for Kalos, with the honourable mention this time round going to Go-Goat. But anyway guys, with all that being said, that pretty much wraps things up for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. Also, be sure to tell me what Pokemon you would give Ash and what changes you'd make to his teams down below. One more thing, I wanted to say thanks again to Entity Maze for allowing me to cover this idea. Be sure to check out his video, which will be linked in the description. But with all that being said, for now, I've been PokéDan, you've been amazing, and I'll see you guys next time.